have got a structural engineer who, in conjunction with my urban search and rescue advisor, is monitoring the stability of the building. At the moment, the building continues to be safe for our crews to go and work in.
Sadly, I can confirm that 12 people that have died that we know of. This is going to be a long and complex recovery operation, and I do anticipate that the number of fatalities will sadly increase beyond those 12.
Hours after the fire started, some people were still waiting to be rescued. Eventually, firefighters were able to reach some of those who'd been trapped and carry them to safety. In the confusion, many people are worried about what's happened to family and friends.
Right, very
Tito, I'm alive, I'm all right. I'm in Arrow Club.
The building had recently been refurbished. A residents' action group say they've been complaining for years about fire safety and that only a catastrophic event would expose the issues.
So I peeked through the window. I saw fire engines everywhere. At least one of them could have pressed our bells to say, wake up all of you, there's fire in your building. Nothing.
Were there no alarms in the corridor?
No alarm, nothing.
In the 2.5 years I was there was never an evacuation test. Then one of the new boilers tripped out the beginning of last year, and we lost power to the building. And half of the emergency stairwell was not lit, so the emergency lighting did not work on half of the stairwell.
The official advice to residents in the event of a fire was to stay within their flats and await rescue. But the Mayor of London says that initially, firefighters couldn't get above the 12th floor. He says questions will need to be answered as soon as possible about what went wrong.
You're right to raise the question about issues raised by tenants on that block and others. And the reason why it should be a huge source of concern for all of us is there are many tower blocks across London and across the country. Many of them are the responsibility of local authorities. Others are the responsibility of private management companies. And we need to make sure that the legitimate questions people have are answered. But you'll appreciate that our focus today has to be search and rescue and then recovery.
Many of the residents are Muslim, and because Ramadan means fasting during daylight hours, they eat late at night. So many were still awake when the fire started. That may have saved lives, though getting out of the tower block was difficult.
There's just one staircase, one in, one out. So if you can't get to them staircase, you are not getting out that building. There's only one way out that building, and that's to jump.
In the early hours of the morning, one man spoke on the phone to a relative trapped on the 21st floor.
The woman sounds like calm, and she wasn't panicked or anything. And I said, where is your husband? She said, he's talking to the emergency. And I said, why didn't you come out? She said, they tell us to stay in. We cannot come out. And I said, what did they ask you to do? She said, they asked us to cover the doors with towels. And she said, but the fire is coming heavily. And then about, I think, 10, 15 minutes later, we phoned them back. And I said, where is your husband? She said, he's still talking. And they said, they're coming to us. And I said, what happened? She said, the last thing she said, smoke is coming heavily through the door into the flat. And that was the last time we heard of her.
More than 200 firefighters were deployed. Residents who were led to safety by them praised their courage.
As I was going downstairs, you had 3 firefighters going up the stairs, putting their BA sets on, basically going up, trying to rescue as many people as they possibly did.
The authorities admit that at the moment they have no idea how many people are still unaccounted for.
You know, I pray to God that they're okay. The fire did go and spread to that part of the building, their parts of the building, and I know that I was told from people who had managed to contact them that they had moved to the flats next door, but we've asked around. I know people, the services and the authorities here are still trying to gather information. We've gone to several of the rescue centres that have been set up and asked and given names, but we've had nothing so far. I know it takes a while. I'm just praying to God that they're all right.
Pictures and names of the missing are now being circulated with appeals for information. Among them, well-known artist GijTeMas.
Khadija sent out a message about 12 hours ago to say that she was trapped and that everybody should pray for her. We've come down trying to look for her. We've been everywhere, we can't find her.
London hospitals dealt with dozens of casualties, as well as those seeking information about loved ones who are missing. The scale of the inferno means it could be many hours or even days before the final numbers of dead and injured from this disaster are known. Ian Woods, Sky News.
And that fact that it could take a very long time before they're able to ascertain exactly how many people perished in this tower block was made very clear by the emergency services just around an hour or so ago when they gave us the update on the latest figures that 12 people have died. They said that although the firefighters have made it all the way to the top floor, that certainly doesn't mean that there has been a full search of the building. But what they can say with heavy hearts and some sense of certainty is that there's nobody alive still left in there. We have seen here a couple of private ambulances leaving in the last couple of hours. There are clearly bodies being taken from this flat. We have also seen at the rescue centres where a number of people were sent overnight at real anger and just extraordinary grief as information is filtering through to people that their loved ones have passed away. It does lead, though, to questions about the structure of this building and others like it. There's been a parliamentary meeting this afternoon, a cross-party meeting, 4 o'clock it started, and a short time after it ended, Nick Hurd, the Police and Fire Minister, gave us this update.
Well, we're all coping with the shock and the profound sadness of the horrific scenes at the Grenfell Tower last night, and so our thoughts, as everyone's, are with the victims of the tragedy and with the friends and families and those looking for information and answers. So what we are determined to do is to make sure that the government and the system of public services is working in the most effective way to support the first responders and the emergency support service, but also those who have been caught up in this horrific tragedy, to make sure that they've got the support and the information they need. And it was a meeting of senior ministers and senior officials from across the system, and I leave it feeling reassured that the resources are in place and the capacity is in place to support people through this immediate emergency response.
What are you doing to make sure that other tower blocks are safe?
That was discussed in the meeting, recognised as an issue because there are people out there who are going to need reassurance. So we've discussed with the Department for Regional Government, local authorities and the fire service a process whereby we seek to identify towers that might be in a similar process of refurbishment, run a system of checks and inspections so that we as quickly as possible can give reassurance to people.
And no money will be spared for that programme?
This is an issue of resources at the moment. Everyone I've spoken to on the front line, with fire, or the police, the ambulance services, resources have not been the issue. People arrive very quickly and in good numbers and with the right equipment to deal with really an unprecedented situation. Last night you heard the fire commissioner say that in 29 years have not seen a fire like this. Not an issue of resources, because the government, on behalf of the people, is absolutely determined to make sure that we're there to support the emergency support services, but also the people who've been caught up in this tragedy.
Do you accept MPs' claims that ministers ignored warnings that building regulations needed to be updated? They were woefully out of date.
No, I'm not going to comment on that, because I hope people will understand that the priority of the government at the moment is to manage the emergency response, to deal with the security, to deal with lives to be saved, lives to be rebuilt, and to make sure that we've got the support in place for this emergency response. That will then move into recovery phase, and then we will move into a phase where we seek to answer the questions that people quite understandably have, so that we really understand what happened here, what went wrong, what worked, what didn't work, so that we do not find ourselves in this situation, because I don't think anyone wants to go through another night last night.
But can you reassure people that lessons will be learnt this time?
What I can reassure people is that once we get through the emergency response situation, the recovery phase, there will be an intensive process to really understand what happened here, and that any lessons that need to be learned are learned, so that we don't go through this experience again.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, John Craig, who's down in Westminster. John, a lot of reassurances being given by the Police and Fire Minister, Nick Hurd, sorry. But we spoke to Harriet Harman a little earlier today, and she said, lessons should have been learned after the previous fire in a tower block in South London just a few years ago, that a lot of people have been lobbying the government and that the government hasn't been listening.
Yes, the Labour MPs like Harriet Harman, Jim Fitzpatrick, who's a former firefighter, have talked about a block of a fire in a block in Harriet Harman's South London constituency. That was in 2009. It's a block called Lacarnal House, and after that there was plenty of pressure from MPs for tougher regulations. Now, last year a review of building regulations covering fire safety was promised by Gavin Barwell. He was then the housing minister. He lost his seat last Thursday. He's now chief of staff in Number 10. And you heard Nick Hurd there, who's only been in his job 2 days, say that he's not going to get into answering any questions about accusations about action not being taken and so on. The big news really from this meeting here that's just taken place this afternoon is that there are going to be checks now on a number of buildings. We don't know how many there are affected. We've asked that question. We haven't had an answer. Buildings in a similar state of repair, similar state of refurbishment. Now that's why that they had the Department of Communities and Local Governments here. The suggestion from Labour MPs like Harriet Harman, who I spoke to earlier, is that it's too expensive, and that's why the government hasn't done it. At this meeting we did have a minister from the Department of Communities and Local Government. That's Alok Sharma. He's Gavin Barwell's replacement. He's the new Housing and Planning Minister. There was also Philip Dunn from the Department of Health. There was Penny Mordaunt from the Department of Work and Pensions, who specialises in disabled people, because it's feared that some of the people affected in this fire may have been disabled people. And also there's John Hayes from Transport as well. The meeting was about an hour and a quarter or so. Mr. Hurd clearly had one announcement to make, but in terms of accusations that the government should have done more to prevent this, well, he says that's for the future. But clearly it's going to be a bit of a row about this. Parliament's obviously not sitting at the moment, but there will be claims that the government should have acted earlier on precautions and regulations and safety checks.
John, thanks very much. Let's talk now to Sky's Mark White, who is in a different location, not too far from the tower block. And Mark, one of the things that has emerged throughout the course of the day, which is really makes your blood run cold, is that the official fire advice to people in that building was if there is a fire, go back to your flat, lock the door, you will be rescued. And we know, of course, that people in the end were throwing themselves from windows of these upper stories.
There is an urgent review underway now and some real concern about that advice. And it wasn't just the property management company. We have obtained a poster actually from inside that tower block, a poster that was given to residents there telling them what to do in the event of a fire. And effectively it says, look, if there's a fire in the tower block, if it's not in your flat, then go back into your flat, lock the door, put some rags under the door, but let the fire service deal with it. And that's the official advice, really, as I say, not just for this block, but tower blocks across this city and elsewhere. It's fire brigade advice. And it's understandable advice, because most of these fires that we've seen erupting in tower blocks, they're usually confined to 1-2 flats at the most. But this was very unusual. Was able to race the sides of all of the buildings and then work its way internally into all of the flats. That's of great concern, but of course...
I just remember their faces and all the family, all of them had the children upstairs and no one out, no one know where they are. It's like, it's horrible feeling. When I just remember the faces, the people's faces.
The safety concerns about their preparedness for dealing with a large-scale fire.
I saw a man actually throw himself out of the window, you know, and kids actually, me and Tamara both saw a kid being dangled out of the window. A lot of dead bodies that were all on the floor. They were obviously covered up, but there were a lot of people that did not make it fall.
If I'd fell asleep, we'd all been dead. That's how bad it was, 100%. Because there weren't no warning, there weren't no proper noise to let us know nothing was happening. Do you know what I mean? It was frightening.
What was going through my mind is just want to save my family. I saw people jumping out the window, man. It was crazy. As the fire brigade went upstairs, they brought kids down. I was helping kids. I saw a kid that couldn't breathe properly.
We didn't know, no alarm, no water, nothing. You know, like it was very shocking.
You just saw the flames getting closer and closer to their house, and you just watched yourself. They got about 5 minutes left.
We literally watched the man burn to death in his flat. We watched the flames enter his house, go through his living room, and go straight into the room that he was in.
Obviously, people were still sleeping on the higher floors, so they didn't have a clue what was going on. I'm not even sure if half of them got out, to be honest with you. There's kids at the window, there was people flashing their phone lights just for help, but the fire brigade couldn't get upstairs.
On the 26th floor, 25th floor, there was 4 people, looked like 2 children and 2 adults, and they were just waving like crazy from the top.
I took my daughter and I just ran to the stairs. As soon as I ran out, I saw already the fire holding one side, and inside we didn't know what's going on.
Intense heat within these flats. We are seeing spontaneous combustion materials inside because of the heat, that every now and again we hear explosions and fire ripping through that building. So it's still very dangerous, still an active damping down, firefighting and now search and recovery operation underway.
Mark, thanks very much for that comprehensive summary really of what we've seen during the course of the day. We're going to bring you a summary in greater detail really, 1:30 this hour, and as well as 7:30, 9:30 tonight. We're going to bring you a 12-minute special looking at the story of what unfolded here last night and what has happened during the day, and indeed also looking ahead to the ramifications of what this possibly means for other buildings of this nature around the UK. We're going to take a short break.
So Owen, are you still on with me?
Joined now by 2 young girls, Asia and Christina, who are worried about a friend. You guys had several friends living in that building, I understand, is that right? But one you haven't been able to get in touch with. Yeah. Tell me, who are you looking for?
Jessica Urbano. She's 12 years of age and she was left in her house by herself, and when she had realised that her tower had caught fire, she tried to call her mum at 1:39 precisely, and her dad was at a friend's house downstairs lower in the tower, and she was left alone. When she had tried to call her mum, she couldn't get through, and then the phone call cut out, and ever since then we haven't heard any more information. We're not sure if she's safe or if she'll not, God forbid anything has happened to her, and she lives quite high up in the tower, the 20th floor, and it's a 27-storey tower, so I hope she is alright. When I tried to contact her, there's nothing. Several people have called her. Her auntie posted something on Twitter, and it's just spreading around because we just want to know that she's safe.
You had other friends who lived in the building as well, is that right?
Yeah.
So you've been in that building before many times?
Yeah, I stayed at Jessica's house like a few weeks ago, and it was just like her house was so nice, the block's such a nice building, and it had just been redone up, and to think that it's gone, like my mum was really upset because the blocks around here, they've been here for ages, and they kind of stay like a part of history around Notting Hill, and to think that it's just gone now, it's heartbreaking. By the time I got back to my little bit, because it's just down the road, the whole of the building was on fire. It's definitely escalated. We literally watched the man burn to death in
flat. We watched the flames enter his house, go through his living room, and go straight into the room that he was in. And that's not something
most people that live in these buildings are people we grew up with, are kids that are my little brothers and my little sisters' friends. These are people you see daily. These are, the neighbours you say hi to. These are people that we actually know, or people that we know of, or people that we see all the time. So I think it's definitely hit home in the sense where these are all little kids that are, luckily for me, my little brothers and sisters were safe in their beds, but it's just people
as is now
age,
increasingly the way, the first inkling that the public have of the people who have been affected by a disaster, or from images captured from social media, the families releasing desperate pleas for help, for information about the people that they can't track down. Let's just run through some of those who we know are missing. 12-year-old Jessica Urbano, she is among the missing. Her aunt says she became separated from her family in the fire. Friends of her aunt have been appealing for information on social media. They've asked people to search hospitals specifically. Maybe she's ended up in a hospital separate from her family, and she's unable to explain who she is. Hesham Rahman last had contact with his family at 3 in the morning. He said he could smell smoke. His flat on the 20th floor.
There's neighbours all running out, people screaming as a fireman, and they go, get out the block, get out the block. So I'm only in my boxers, so I ran back in, put my dressing gown on, grabbed the little girl, put her under my dressing gown, got my girlfriend up, and ran down the stairs, down to the ground floor and out, and then looked up, and it was literally how we got out. It was like half of the block was ablaze by the